Thank you very much. And I would like to thank the organizing committee for having me to talk about two passions, which are Ireland and Oscar Wilde. So, right, this is a quote from W.B. Yeats about from the Wanderings of Dorian, just for you to remember what is going to happen in the picture of Dorian Gray. He talks about this place where Oisin is taken, but here there is no law nor rule, nor have hands held the weary tool, and here there is nor change nor death, but only kind and merry breath, for joy is God and God is joy. So my talk will be divided into 4 parts. The first part will be to set up the context. Next, I'll move on to talk about the myth of Oisin. I don't know if you're familiar with it. The third, talking about the picture of Dorian Gray and how it reflects that myth of Oisin, and just the conclusions. So, on the 30th of... Okay, sorry, no, don't worry. So, on the 30th of August, 1889, Oscar Wilde had dinner with J.M. Stoddart, the editor of the Lippincott monthly magazine, and Arthur Conan Doyle. The American asked the others to write a novel each, a text that will be published the following year. Wilde tried to make a tale of a fisherman and a mermaid, which later would be The Fisherman and His Soul. But he couldn't reach the 35,000 words agreed. So finally, he opted for the story of a young man whose portrait would suffer the passing of time, as well as the corruption of his soul, while his body remained young and beautiful. According to Wilde himself, in an interview that published in the Pall Mall Gazette in September 1890, the idea had come to his mind in December in 1987, when he saw his face in the portrait Francis Richard had just painted. He said, "When the sitting was over and I had looked at the portrait, I said in jest, 'What a tragic thing it is. This portrait will never grow older, and I shall. If only it was the other way.' The moment I had said this, it occurred to me what a capital plot the idea would make for the story." So what made him change his mind, apart from the 30,000 words? According to Sturgis, it was the length of the story, but there could be another reason. In February 1889, Wilde wrote in the Woman's World magazine that he was editing a review of Irish fairy tales, a book by an Irish young writer he had met in London, William Butler Yeats. The following month, he did the same thing with The Wanderings of Dorian and other poems by the same author, a text that he would return to. In July, not just 2 months before that dinner with Stoddart, he published in the Pall Mall Gazette the review, Mr. Yeats's Wanderings of Dorian, focusing on that poem and not in the whole book. Both writers knew each other personally, at least since 1887. The influence of Oscar Wilde on Yeats has already been established by different scholars, such as Noreen Doody, for example, in 2018. However, Wilde had Yeats in great esteem as an author. In fact, when he was in prison, he was not allowed to have books because he was hard labor sentence. But he asked Robert Ross to get him some, and The Secret Rose was among the books that he wanted. Therefore, it is plausible to talk about an influence that goes the other way around. The Wanderings of Dorian and other poems is full of references to the passing of time. Apart from the story of the mythical poem, the second poem, called The Time and the Witch Viven, is a dialogue between two characters that finishes with the sudden death of the woman. We can also read the Meditation of the Old Fisherman and the Song of the Last Arcadian, later called the Song of the Happy Shepherd, and we are told that of all the many things in dreary dancing past our world, to the old cracked tune that Kronos sings, words alone are certain good. So, Oscar Wilde was accused of plagiarism since he began his writing career. In fact, his book of poems was rejected by the Oxford Union in 1881 on the grounds that they were immoral and plagiarized from very well-known English writers. Years later, something similar would be said about Salome and its debt to Gautier or Flaubert. among others. The question that arises is whether Yeats's The Wanderings of Dorian and other poems and Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray were connected, and if so, whether the myth of Oisin could be established as the common thread. So, what is this myth of Oisin? Although Oscar Wilde's father, Sir William Wilde, was an eminent folklorist, collector, and archaeologist, and his mother, Lady Wilde, published Sir William's folk material after his death in 1876, none of them retold the myth of Oisin in any of their books. Despite this, they were familiar with it. The myth of Oisin became popular in Europe through James Macpherson's alleged translation of the verses of Oisin, son of Finn MacCool, founder of the Fianna. The Scottish author published 3 books between 1760 and 1763. And the fame of this book was such that Sir William Wilde recommended his reader to investigate Finn MacCool's history, whose name Macpherson spelled Fingal, and Lady Wilde considered her choice for her newborn baby boy, Oscar Fingal of Flaherty, Wills Wilde. She considered it grand, misty, and oceanic. As far as Wilde himself is concerned, he mentioned Macpherson's work in his American Conference Irish Poets in the 19th century, and his style resembles that of the Scottish author, according to Doyle Corn. In Ireland, the story is very well known from the Middle Ages, orally from the 9th century, and on paper since the 12th century, from a text called Agalan na Sionorak, or the Colloquy of the Old Men. It describes the encounter of St. Patrick's with 2 members of the Fianna, which was a mythical army. And although Cuilta, which is one of the warriors, used to be the main character, soon Oisin took his place. And by the mid-18th century, the tale was the version that Yeats took as a basis for his poem. In the story, Oisin tells Patrick how he was hunting with other men of the Fianna after a battle when a beautiful woman appeared to them and identified herself as Niamh, the daughter of the King of the Young. Asked about her purpose, she said that she wanted to take her love, Oisin, with her to a marvelous place which can be identified as Tir na Nog, which Maria described in her talk, also called the Land of the Youth. Once there, Oisin was explained that what that place was all about. It was a place where there was no law and the soul was free and flawless, and where sorrow did not exist and where joy was divine. Oisin tells Patrick that although he spent his time with his beloved Niamh in such a wonderful place, traveling from one island to another and hunting, he really missed the Fianna. So one day he expressed his desire to go back to Ireland to see them. The wish was granted, but Oisin was warned. If his foot touched the ground, he would not return to Tir na Nog. Once back in Ireland and unable to find his friend, Oisin fell on the ground and he was trying to help a group of men. And the moment his foot touched the earth, his 300 years fell on him, and he was bowed to double, and his beard swept the ground. That's what Yeats explained in Fairy Tales of Ireland. He just had time to tell the story to St. Patrick before he died. The Picture of Dorian Gray is the story of a young man, a young and beautiful man who had his portrait painted by his friend Basil Howard. And after a conversation about beauty with Lord Henry Wotton, one of Wilde's most famous dandies, Dorian expresses his desire that the passing of time would not mar his looks. After breaking his engagement with a young actress, which leads to her suicide, Dorian realizes that his evil deeds have not damaged his beauty and decides to live a hedonistic and careless life. He soon notices that the passing of time does not have any effect on him either, which makes him stay young and handsome for years and years. However, the man in the portrait is more and more evil-looking, showing the depravity of his soul. And one night, tired, Tired of a life of corruption and wishing for a new start, he takes a knife and tears the portrait. And when the servants and the police arrive at the part of the house where squeak seems to come from, they find an unfamiliar, evil-looking man dead in front of a portrait of a young and handsome boy. David Upchurch in 1892 was probably the first mention to the relationship between this myth of Oisin and Oscar Wilde's novel. In this book, Upchurch talks about different things like the fascination with eternal youth and beauty, talks about nature as part of the folklore of Ireland, and different figures of speech, like repetitions and satire. So here we want to focus on the myth of Oisin as told by W.B. Yeats. So, Oisin and Dorian Gray. As soon as the picture of Dorian Gray was published in its first version in 1890, and a correspondence between Dr. Faustus and Dorian Gray was established. And probably because of Dorian's mention to giving his soul in exchange for youth. Also, the Lord Henry's Mephistophelian figure contributes to this analogy, according to Pantovic. Obviously, Goethe was a strong influence on Wilde's perception of beauty, as he confessed in one of his conferences in the United States in 1882. However, Dr. Faustus was not aware was aware that he was selling his soul in exchange for knowledge, whereas Dorian only expresses a desire. And the way Yeats and Wilde express this desire is very similar, because both of them use construction with if. In the case of Wilde, he says, "Oh, if it were only the other way, if the picture could change and I could be always where I am now." And that is the reason why we think that Oisin was a closer inspiration, because he said, "I cried, O nymph, O white one, if only a 12-hour day, you must gaze at the beard of Finn and move where the old men and young, in the Fenians' dwelling of water lean on the chessboard and play, and sweet to me now were even bold Conan's slenderest tongue." That's how Yeats expresses it. The second part, the second similarity is the fawn. Where they're related, because Oisin means fawn in Irish at the time. So, and when Lord Henry Wotton meets Sybil Vanes, which is Dorian's fiancée, he says that Lord Henry sees something of the fawn. It's not of a fawn, it's the fawn. So what fawn does he refer to? I think that it's probably Oisin. Because after calling off the wedding with Sybil and her suicide, Dorian enters into that realm of Tirnanog, of the young of the youth, and he perceives that day that the picture is changing, and the expression looked different, and one would have said that there was a touch of cruelty in the mouth. That's what Dorian expresses. The next similarity is Tirnanog, and amorality and temporality. When Dorian discovers that neither time nor wickedness will have an effect on him, he describes the attitude he indulges himself with the words eternal youth, infinite passion, pleasure subtle and secret, wild joys and wilder sins. He was to have all these things. The portrait was to bear the burden of his shame. That was all. And Tirnanog was the place where Oisin was taken by Nymph, and is described by Yeats in similar terms, saying, "A place where change and death, they come not near, where everything that is sad is wicked, where people are not judged because there is no law nor sin, a place where people find that joy is God, and God is joy," as we said at the beginning. And these concepts of time were revised in his second version of the Wanderings of Dorian. Yeats wrote a few versions, and in the second one he highlighted the growing importance of the time. Tirnanog is identified with the home of the fairies, which is the race of the Tuatha, one of the mythical beings of Irish folklore. And Niamh and her family, her father, uncles, the love of God, belong to this race. Wilde knew about the Tuatha, both because of Lady Wilde's book, Ancient Legends, Mythic Terms and Superstitions of Ireland, and Yeats's Fairy and Folk Tales of the Irish Peasantry, published in 1888, which he revised. Therefore, we could say that Dorian behaves as if he were living in that mythical place, rather than in London at the end of the 19th century. There's also a religious viewpoint in both works that has not been addressed yet. In Yeats's version of the myth of Oisin, Patrick tries to win the Bard's soul for his gods before it is too late. And Yeats says, "But weep thou, and wear thou the flags with thy knees, for thy soul that is lost, for thy youth without peace, and the years with the demons and the godless fires of thine age." Vasil, when he goes to see Dorian and he sees the corruption of Dorian's soul in the portrait, he says, "Let us kneel, Dorian, down and try if we cannot remember a prayer." None of them succeed. The first, Patrick, received Oisin's rejection, and if you haven't read The Picture of Dorian Gray, I'm not going to spoil you what happens to Basil, but that doesn't convince Dorian that much. And finally, the death of both heroes. That is the most obvious similarity between the two pieces of the two works. In Yeats's poem, Oisin says, "And my years 300 fell on me, in a rose I walked on the earth, a creeping old man, full of sleep, with the spittle of my beard never dry." And as we said, when Dorian dies, nobody recognizes the body, because all the years and all the corruption has changed his face, and they see a beautiful portrait. So, my conclusion, The Picture of Dorian Gray was accused of plagiarism as soon as it was published, like Wilde's poetry had been before. Even though Wilde copied word by word from other books to describe objects, such as instruments in The Picture of Dorian Gray, as Sobel Murray highlighted, the similarities with Faustus have been the most recognizable. However, after this analysis, we strongly believe that W.B. Yeats and the Wanderings of Dorian, and especially the myth of Dorian, could be added to the many influences in the book, because they were published within a year's difference, because Wilde had just received the book of poems when he was commissioned the novel, and because there's some formal and plot details in both pieces of work. Furthermore, the relationship between the two Irish men was very good at the time, according to the autobiography by Yeats. Wilde said in his review, "The true artist is known by the use he makes of what he annexes, and he annexes everything. So consequently, annexing the work of an admired fellow countryman and friend seems then the most natural thing to do."